Hey everyone, got a really special show for you today. Of course, it is Thursday, and that means in our expert series, we bring back Jonathan Twomley. How you doing, sir?
I'm great. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing very well. Well, you know where we got to start. It's Thursday, so we got to talk about the new unemployment claims. And for me, it's the continuing claims. So surprisingly good numbers today. I don't know if you saw
Yeah,
them, but that's
I
what I
did.
saw.
I saw them this morning. The continuing claims were down pretty substantially. I mean, it's like a substantial number.
Yeah, under
And
900K. Yeah, 881,
and
I think.
well, that was
Oh, no, continuing.
that
Sorry.
was that was the new, but the new claims are down a lot.
Yeah.
They beat the consensus by a lot,
Yeah.
And the continuing claims also down, and unemployment is, depending on how you count it now, below 10%.
Yeah,
Which
we'll
is
know
still,
tomorrow. It'll be interesting, right? Tomorrow's
yeah,
Friday, right? Yeah, tomorrow's Friday.
yeah.
So we'll see. That's the big thing, right? Last month was 10-1, I think. If I remember, it might have been 10-3, 10 something. So we'll see tomorrow. You want to do an over under? Let's say over under 9.5. What would you take the over or the under tomorrow's published unemployment figure of 9.5%? What do you got?
Well, what I saw was the projection of 9.2, so I'm going to take the under because
Okay.
I've already seen the number. I got the inside dough.
See, look at you. All right, folks, do me a favor. Leave some comments below. Over under is 9.5. Just say over or under, and we'll see in the next 24 hours how we do. And again, apparently we've got a sneak peek that it's going to be 9.2. So let's see what happens.
That's what I saw. But good news that things are trending in the right direction. And I think September is the month that's going to really tell, though, because with schools reopening, we'll see how this goes. But if it's still trending down, even though we've got some school reopenings happening, that's all good.
Yeah. Well, this is my belief, because I believe the unemployment numbers, both new claims and continuing claims, have been net positive, right? For the last, call it 4 or 5 weeks, meaning the trend is in the right direction. I believe that is the only reason we do not have a stimulus bill today. If those numbers were 2x what they actually were, we'd have a stimulus bill done already. Is that fair to think about?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard anybody make that point before, but I think that makes sense. It certainly takes pressure off.
Yes.
If you've got the trend going in the right direction. Yeah. So, as I continue to say, I do feel we're going to hit. I think we're still, because we're still having unemployment claims happening, right?
Oh, absolutely. So, 881. Yeah,
right.
1,000.
Well, a lot. I mean, higher than the previous high still, right? So that suggests to me that we may be moving into the period where it's not simply, this isn't from closures anymore, right? Or from shutdowns.
Right. Correct.
This is from like businesses that have gone out of business.
Yes.
And I think that we're going to, we may still see re-shutdowns and have that all happen again, but I think that the downward trend in new claims is from businesses reopening, but the fact that it's still so high is because businesses have disappeared. And at some point, we're going to hit that point where the new claims may start dropping, but the continuing claims are going to be
flattening. Yeah, exactly.
Because we've hit that point where, okay, now the low-hanging fruit of just sending people back to work is done, and you've got all the people whose jobs disappeared, and now you can see that in the system. Like now that's covered by the shutdown kind of noise, right? And we don't know yet. Really, there's very little information out there on small business closures because they tend not to file for bankruptcy.
Right.
So it's a very opaque number. Usually small businesses, they're running on really thin margins, but they also don't have very much debt. So they just, when they decide to fold up shop, they just shut the doors, give the key to the landlord, and they walk out, and that's it. And they're not filing for bankruptcy, so you don't really see you don't really see it happening. It's hard to track. So but we know that this is going on.
Yeah, I see. This is what I don't know if predicting or thinking is coming. I don't know what the right word is, but it is a lot quicker to shut a business down than start a new one. So I think the logic holds, and that's what I'm seeing is eventually we are going to get to a flattening of the continuing claims, and that is probably going to go on for weeks or for months, in my opinion. And then what will happen is, I believe, the capitalist system, right? This thing that we both love so much will kick in, and new businesses will open, but there will be a gap, and it will
Yeah.
be a slow trudge out. But I think the businesses that come out of this will be in a better position. I think by summer of 2021, whenever that is, they're going to have lower lease rates. They're going to probably be buying equipment for pennies on the dollar. They're just going to be more profitable, but it's going to be a hard trudge for another 12 months or so.
Yeah, at least. And I think too that, there are certain sectors which are going to have a hard time coming back, right? So tourism is going to continue to take a hit, especially if it's international tourism, right?
Yeah.
So, and then also, energy, with all those planes not flying and people not driving, energy is also taking a big hit. So, there was someone posted the other day about the Houston market and how some of the local multifamily guidance there is essentially like, choppy waters ahead for rentals in Houston because of both of these things. And of course, like I had a little glee about this because, it's like, oh, multifamily doesn't do so great in recession. If there's unemployment, then it affects multifamily right up until,
oh my God,
like literally up until, 6 months ago, the same publications were saying, oh, don't worry, multifamily in a recession is always fine because everybody rents. I mean, now look, we've got this situation where everybody's buying because of this particular recession. If they're not renting,
we're seeing the strongest renters buy. It's just reality. Yes.
Yeah, and this is creating headwinds for multifamily in certain markets.
Yeah.
And in a separate and apart from the economic fallout of the lack of tourism. So what I'm saying is, what I'm sort of getting around to saying is that I think that there are certain sectors and certain markets that are going to be affected for longer and deeper because of the restrictions on travel, and not even the restrictions, just people's reluctance to travel even when things open up.
Yes.
And where I wanted to go with this was that, yes, both you and I are ardent capitalists, but the part of what happens in the capitalist system is they're market based, and markets are at the end of the day based on people's perceptions, right?
Correct. Yes.
So if it's all about sentiment, and if the sentiment is I'm not ready to travel, and enough people out there are saying I'm not ready to travel yet, it makes me nervous to get on a plane, that is going to have an effect. And so you will certainly, I think, in a lot of places have, for people who do start up businesses, like you said, they're going to have lower lease, they're going to be able to walk into, say, restaurants, like restaurants that are ready to go, no build out cost,
zero,
lower lease, right? So they're going to be set up well for future profits, but they may have to be ready to sort of ride out a period of time where people are anxious about eating out, or where they just don't have as much business because they were heavily dependent on foreign tourism before, and that's all dried up.
Yeah.
So we still have.
This is what I see coming, though, and I think that's all. Creative destruction is a magical force. It hurts when it impacts you, obviously, but when you look at it from the outside, it is what makes our system go, right? Frothiness goes up, it falls apart. I mean, look at Tesla the last 3 days, it's down 17%. Because who knew? Oh my God, Tesla's market cap is bigger than the top 5 automotive companies around the world. And oh, by the way, they produce, 1/20th the number of cars. Oh my God, go figure. It's craziness. But where I'm going with this is I see, let's use restaurants as the example. I really do see restaurant owners by next summer taking on properties that they will be able to eke out profits in that environment that you've just talked about, right? Whether they have to do curbside delivery or whatever it is. But then, you fast forward a year and they're printing money.
Right. Well, if they can get these cheaply enough that they can make money at that extremely low level of business, and that's really going to be the key, right? Whether the landlords are going to be saying to them, like, the landlords can take either one of two positions. One position is, we just got to rent this thing, and we got to get some money in the door.
Yeah, something more than zero. Yeah,
we're going to work with you. Or the landlords could say, hey, next year you're going to be printing money, so you got to pay me for the expectation of next year. Or they're going to have big, like rent increases, kickers or things like that. So maybe that's the way it's going to go. Is they're going to put them in a low base rent, but then they're going to have
maybe
kickers based on their revenue or whatever.
Well, I would be negotiating hard if I was going to be a restaurateur stepping into an environment of uncertainty. And if I didn't get what I wanted, I'd go to another space because there's going to be lots of spaces available.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah.
But let's talk for a minute though before we go into the next topic, just about something we touched on about the home buying, right?
Yeah.
Because
let's do it.
Because I think I saw something this morning on Seeking Alpha about sort of optimism about the builder, so new home sales,
Yep,
right? And
I saw it. Yep.
New home sales are way up, and construction is way up. And what this article was arguing was that, well, this trend is going to stay in place because of the undersupply of new housing over the last 10 years.
Yep, I saw that. Yep.
Now, I want to get your thoughts on this because I'm a little bit, what this argument was saying was this is sustainable. This isn't like a COVID reaction, but this is going to go on for years because of the previous 10 years lack of building. And it just initially like raised a couple of like, things for me. Yeah. Because what why what would have like why did this not happen before if rents were so high, the cost of buying existing houses was so high, if people had the money to buy but just suddenly they didn't want to and now they do, but now so like all these things we've been hearing about the millennials for the last 10 years, they don't want to own homes, they only want to
they
rent.
Want to be mobile and blah blah blah.
And now this article is saying, millennials are in their prime home buying period right now, they all want to buy homes. And, what we've been hearing for 10 years is the millennials can't buy homes because they have too much student debt. Now suddenly they have all the money in the world to buy whatever they want.
Yeah.
It's very, and the undersupply is going to mean that this goes on for a long time.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't really add up to me somehow. I just wonder if there was so much pent up demand for new houses, why did we have the undersupply for 10 years? Unless you want to tell me there were structural impediments to doing new construction that prevented it. But then again, why now? Like, why?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think I read that article that you're referencing.
Yeah.
The big thing for me that I thought that article missed, I believe we have pent up demand, right? The millennials now are over 30, right? The oldest of them, and historically speaking, Gen X, all that other generations before them, they were buying homes in their 20s, right? So they're already older than most. But I think what was missing in that article is, I believe it is location based. I believe what we are seeing, the U.S. is tilting where people want to live in greater speed because of this. And what we're seeing is there's a lack of supply of new homes or available homes, even because it's even in the existing homes where people want to go. And that's why we're seeing run-ups 4 hours north of New York. And we're seeing run-ups in the suburbs of the Bay Area and other states. So I don't necessarily believe I think it's too simplistic to say that we're going to see a good 10 years because there's been undersupply. I think there needed to be a comma there saying an undersupply and where people want to go. Because I know in Fresno, while there has been some construction, it has just been sort of keeping up with demand of local demand. But now if Fresno is really going to see a 5 to 10% population increase of buyers, right? They were renting in San Francisco. Now they're going to be buying. There's just not enough supply there. So that's what I think is happening is this crisis has caused lots of business or lots of changes to accelerate. I think that is without question. Zoom Technologies is the greatest example. Talk about going public at the absolute right time. I'm using Zoom to talk to you today, right? The revenue is up 400% year on year and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't happen without this crisis. And I think new home construction is going to go up, but it will only be in certain locations, right? I don't expect new home construction to go up in the Bay Area, for example, like San Francisco. Are you kidding me? There's double the supply from last month. There's no way those projects are going to continue. So I think it's location based, but I think net, we are seeing renters become owners, and we are seeing, just as we said earlier, the most qualified renters are becoming first-time owners. And that is a structural change that accelerated because of this crisis, because technology allows me to work anywhere. And, oh, by the way, sprinkle in, higher taxes in California and New York with lower taxes in Nevada, Arizona, and Florida. Man, it's like a fire with gasoline thrown on it. It's happening in quickly.
Yeah, although I guess I mean I agree with that. But what I don't agree with was like the tone of this article was that it was like this is like you can project this as a linear trend like going forward. So it's just like saying, oh, Zoom is going to grow by 400% every year from now on.
Yeah, not
like I think there's a lot of it that this is a big bump like in the snake. You know what I mean? Like the mouse going through the snake.
Yep.
Because of suddenly everybody wants to move, and then I think a lot of that demand will be satisfied, and the people who are not moving now probably not going to move, right? Because if they're not going to move
if they're going to move now, they're not going to move, right?
Yeah, unless they're priced out or whatever. So there'll be still some people who are moving out who can't do it now.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, like the most COVID sensitive people are moving now. Right?
Yeah, I think there'll be two steps actually. So I think there is the people that were really afraid, and they were the first to leave. And I think you probably see this in New York, probably closest because it got hit hardest. There were some people that just scattered, gone, right? And that happened fast. And I don't know what percentage it is, but it was 10 or 15% of the total people have left. They were first, right? They're like, I'm gone. And now the second wave is what I think New York and San Francisco are seeing. It's like, oh, this has been 4 or 5 months. I'm getting really cranky. I can't work and raise my kids and do the schooling and. Then I'm going to leave, right? I'm going to go 2 hours away and buy a home. But to your point, I don't think there's a third leg, right? I think there's just two, right? There's the scaredy cats. And then there's the people that go, I'm done. I've had enough. I don't want to have my kid or dog screaming in the background. But after that, to your point, I don't think there is a third leg. In fact, I think the third leg takes advantage of the people that left because they're going to go like, wow, I'm paying $2,800 for a studio in New York. I can pay $3,100 and get a 1-bedroom in a better area now. So I think there's going to be movement inside.
Around. Yeah. I mean, it's just like everything else. If something gets cheaper, more people will want it, right? So, and especially once things open up, and they're finally again now talking about maybe we've reached the point in New York City where it's safe to do indoor dining.
Wow, that'd be cool.
So which would be great, although still at lower capacity, but thinking towards the winter when they can't do curbside dining anymore.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky because this summer has not been too hot and it's not been too rainy. So there's been, pretty much every day people have been able to eat outside.
That's good.
Which has been good. But that's, really once you get into November, it's not going to be possible anymore. So they've got to address that situation. But once life starts to return to normal, like there will be people who are like, hey, now, I think what you're going to see is probably a lot of the people who were like doubled up or tripled up in apartments.
Exactly.
Now suddenly they're going to be like, oh, I can actually afford my own studio now, my own 1-bedroom because
they're going to
I
move
don't
out of
have,
the 2 or 3 into the.
That's right, into the 1 by themselves or whatever. So with the couples, in New York, you get these situations. You'll have like a couple that has a third roommate with them. They're going to be like, hey, we want our privacy because we can afford it now.
Right.
So
I think so.
But something else that I saw again on this topic that was very interesting was that there was a very brief research piece I saw about how the second home market, at least while this is going on, has flipped on its head. So what that means is that and is that people are buying second homes within 4 hours of major cities.
Yep.
Which is what I'm seeing, and I went and double checked this on Google, but the Finger Lakes area of New York where we're buying our house is, it's 3.5 hours, so the closest part's 3.5 hours from New York City, 3.5 hours from Philadelphia. So you've got 2 major metros that can get there easily. But anyway, this article is saying within 4 hours, and what people are doing is they're making their country home the base, and they go into their city home when they need to for work or for whatever. So rather than it used to be the weekend house was in the country, now the weekend house or whatever it is in the city, and as long as this goes on. And so I found that extremely interesting. And obviously for people who already have the second houses, that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
for other people now who like us, who, this has been the impetus not to leave the city, but to buy a second house.
Right.
There's a lot of that happening too. And just anecdotally, one of my college friends posted in our class Facebook group that Woodstock, Vermont, which is a tiny little town, but with a lot of second homes, has seen their high school population rise by 90 students because
yeah,
because all those second homeowners have just moved there and put their kids into school in Vermont.
Yeah, and when I hear you saying this is I just go back to why California and New York are going to lose is because people are going to flip where their primary residence is, and as I understand the tax system, they're now going to be, in your example, under Vermont's income tax versus New York income tax, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even within New York City, like New York City has extremely low property taxes, but because we have a city income tax, right? So if you move upstate and you establish your domicile upstate, you will pay higher property taxes. But if you're high income, you're going to pay less tax overall because you're going to not have to pay the city income tax. And then if if we decide to move up to this new house, we'll be doubly better off because it's a rural area, so the taxes are super low, property taxes and no city income tax. But for the time being, we're not doing
I think a lot of people are making that decision. And if in this example you were the person that already had two homes, you're net positive because you were already paying both property taxes.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're in this decision, this conversation is going on at, I don't know what percentage. It's going on at least half of the top earners in New York and California. I'm seeing it in California. There were people that are fundamentally going, I'm out, right? They were talking about taking income tax from 13.3 to 15.6 or something. And it's like enough, right? Now you're almost at a 60% combined taxes. It's like, God damn.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. So, all right. So I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about CDC, right? CDC came out of nowhere and said, Mr. Landlords, you can't evict tenants at certain requirements, right? Below 99K, and they got to prove this and prove that. And oh, by the way, it goes until the end of the year. What are your thoughts on that? I had no idea that the CDC could impact contract law. I thought that was really odd.
Yeah, I found this to be completely bizarre.
Okay, good. As a lawyer, right? You found it bizarre? Good.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think, like, just technically speaking, it's not the CDC doesn't have any power to do this. The CDC wrote an order that Trump then signed as an executive order, so they drafted it, but they don't have the authority to. So this is my understanding is that this is an executive order, but it's based on like a CDC recommendation slash drafted order that was then just signed by the person who has the authority to sign the order. But there's a second question there, though, even there, where does the president actually have, well, first of all, does the federal government have the ability to regulate evictions in states, right?
Yeah, good point.
Very, very
opaque.
My guess would be probably not, right? But then assuming that the federal be done by executive action and not legislative action, right? So, which I think is also extremely dubious. And then you take it to like the bizarro. Well, then you take it to like the next level of abstraction, which is, the CDC. What authority do they have?
Yeah.
And then you take it to like the bizarro level, which is that Trump has been crapping on the CDC for 6 months, and now he's like, oh yeah, the CDC says I gotta do it, stop evictions, and so so it's just, this whole thing was like, when I saw it, it's like my brain just
good. Like, I wasn't alone.
Just popped, because I was like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
Now I guess if there is a good thing in this order, it's that it's not just a blanket restriction, and so I think it does address some of the concerns that landlords have had, which is like, hey, you guys are drawing all this unemployment and you're just not paying me because you just don't want to. This is making people prove that they really can't pay, that they've accessed the resources that are out there, and that and even though they've accessed all the resources, they still don't have the money to pay, and they have to prove it, and they have to prove that it's COVID related.
Yep.
So I think all those things are good and sensible. I would rather see those things as like state legislation
You would
or
think.
at least state maybe the state governors have the ability to do that within their own states, but like I would rather see it that way as opposed to just this. You know, so maybe this will serve as a model for states to take action that's appropriate,
Maybe.
and maybe override some of the ridiculous eviction bans, which have just been sort of like blanket and too broad brush and not really addressing the actual issue, and just inviting people to abuse the system.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think of all the things I saw coming, I got to tell you that was not on my list.
I would not have had that on my 2020 bingo card. This is we've had a lot of bizarre stuff happen this year, but the CDC writing an order to stop evictions was not one of them. That I foresaw.
That wouldn't. Yeah, that's not on my bingo card either. The other thing again is I think there's two things coming, and again I'm just trying to play a chessboard that I've never seen before. This is like 3 or 4 dimensional chess because I'm just trying to make investment decisions on my own, like I always do, and now the world is just so different. First off, I think CDC, when they usually get involved, usually in past crises, money usually shows up behind them, right? And where I see this potentially going is, in the next couple of weeks, the CDC or the HUD or somewhere else, there's going to be a kitty where the folks that are most impacted could pay past due rent, because as the order talks about, the rent's still due. It's just delayed. And I think there's a general understanding that having somebody down 6 months in January is not good for anyone. So I think there's going to be some kind of order that says, hey, landlords, if you take 80 cents on the dollar and wipe it out, we'll pay it, call it good. Economy's back to, revving, and, tenant, you're on your own. That might be very wishful thinking. That might be way outside the box. But again, the 2020 bingo card has already been ripped up and thrown away. So, because at the end of the day, if we don't do something like that, most of these tenants will ghost their landlords because they'll never make up. The landlords, at least in most cases, will file the claim, which will screw up the tenant's credit, and they won't be able to get the next thing. I mean, this doesn't end well for tenants as I see the chessboard playing out. So I think there's going to be some money for some, and then it's going to be a big fight about who gets it and all of that nonsense. The other thing I finally feel good about, the rules have changed so much for landlords this year. I've always been like, how much longer are you going to ask me to carry people? Because I have tenants I've been carrying since March. They're just playing the game. And I'm like, okay, I finally think January might be the end for the first time because of what came out from CDC yesterday afternoon. And they said, states, governors, get ready to distribute vaccines November 1st. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw a headline,
Yeah, I saw the headline. So I read the articles and basically says enough good data. All these people are doing, phase 3 trials. They're going to have results in October. Get the infrastructure going because we're hopeful. So what I'm seeing is, okay, vaccines come out November 1st. You get it if you want it. You don't. If you don't, who cares? That's 2 months until December 31st. And then what we do is we go, okay, economy's open. If you don't take the vaccine, it's on you, right? That's the whole American economy right there. You're free to choose, and you risk what you risk. And, then we see what happens. Because I want to know when these freaking crazy eviction moratoriums are in, because I'm tired of carrying tenants who don't deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, I think too that like the tenants who are going to game the system are people who are not really thinking ahead. Like they're not the kind of people who
there's no planning.
They're very short-term thinkers, right? They're just like, oh, I don't have to pay my rent. So they're not thinking, sweet, and they're not really capable of the longer-term decision making. Unfortunately, but I do, so tinfoil hat time, like November 1st release of vaccines. I mean, is suspiciously
exactly
close to.
There's something else happening in early November. What was that be?
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays things. I'm already seeing there was the here come the vaccines, and then immediately there was like, there's no way in hell I'm taking that thing.
The anti-vaxxers,
the immediate reaction. I mean, but it's not just the anti-vaxxers. It's like everybody's suspicious of everything right now.
Yeah.
There's
5G and Bill Gates and all this.
They're the people on the right who think the vaccine contains like Bill Gates microchip to control you.
I see that.
The people on the left who think like there's no way that this thing could be safe
Yeah.
because of how
Yeah.
fast
Just speed.
it's come out.
Yeah.
And this is clearly like a political play. Like, so it's,
Yeah.
it's going to be sugar water or maybe something really bad, right? And so, like, I think the acceptance rate of the vaccine is going to be very, very low.
Oh, I think so too. Yeah.
I for one, I mean, like, the speed at which this thing has come out has certainly made me think, like, I'm going to want to see some.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to be first in line. Yeah.
Some studies on this thing just to make sure that it's, if it's ineffective, that's one thing. I just don't want the thing to be dangerous, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the thinking about giving it to your kids if you don't know what it is, like, I mean, I think it's no chance. So
no chance. Yeah.
So there's one other thing I'd like to talk about before we go.
Yeah.
Well, one really brief thing to talk about, and then a bigger multifamily thing. So
okay.
The small multifamily thing is we got finally the new accredited investor definition.
Oh yes. Yep.
And there was a lot of a few months ago when the SEC announced that it was going to be revising the rule on who fits the definition of accredited investor. It had forecast that certain licensed professions were going to be given accredited investor status. And so there was a lot of like joyful noise made in the syndication community about, oh, look, we're going to get our definition expanded.
More people,
more money, more money for us. And so the actual text of the rule finally came out the other day, and it was a big kind of lead balloon.
Yeah.
It was instead, so people had been speculating that lawyers and CPAs and other kind of highly qualified and licensed professionals were going to be given accredited investor status by virtue of their sophisticated work, right?
Yep. Education,
and often investment related work. And instead, what happened was the SEC just said these three categories of securities licensed people are now considered accredited regardless of income. And let's get realistic about this. I don't know how many of those people in those three categories were making less than $200,000 a year anyway, in a lot of those professions, right? So, maybe some security salespeople who were earlier in their career or in small towns and they're not making that much money or whatever, they now qualify. But it really was a big, like, all the air came out of the balloon.
Yeah.
It really didn't expand things very much. It was a lot of nothing. So there was, people got very excited when it came out, and then when they started reading the rule, they're like, "Oh, this doesn't really change anything."
Yeah. So maybe just to give a scale of the I don't know, downside surprise, I guess. If people were getting excited and they thought the pie was going to grow by 50%, it sounds like what came out is maybe it grew by 5%. I mean, it's a really big miss.
Yeah, it's a huge miss.
Okay.
Anyway, that was like sort of syndication news. And then on the multifamily front, we've just been, so back when COVID hit, the multifamily operators and really the whole business went into the circle the wagons mode.
Yep.
And it became, let's preserve cash, not make distributions, call a halt to everything.
Yeah.
The brokers were expecting there to be price declines, and there were a little bit of price declines in the market. And then we had this enormous amount of stimulus money get pumped into the system, and people continued paying their rent, at least in the A and B properties and the professionally managed properties. And so now, 6 months later, we are in a world of great complacency in the multifamily market, where everybody has now decided it's all fine. And sellers are becoming even more aggressive about price. And because they're like, oh, look, everything's fine. All the rent got collected. No worries. And nothing, nothing to see here. And also like, hey, you don't want to put your money in the stock market, do you? So invest in multifamily. It's the best, it's the safest thing.
Right.
So owners have actually gotten even more aggressive. I actually underwrote a deal this morning and really couldn't figure out at the asking price, even actually $1 million less than the asking price on the deal, couldn't figure out how to get more than a 4% cash on cash return.
Wow.
From the property. When I don't know what happens in the single family space, but with multifamily properties, very often when you buy the property, your taxes go up by a
Yep.
tremendous amount.
Same in singles. Yep.
So if the taxes stayed at the original amount, the deal would be, produce 5%. It's not great, but still 5%, people can get their heads around 5%.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're with the tax increases, you're talking about 3.5%, maybe even less. Plus you still have these COVID escrows to pay.
Yep.
And even though you get that money back, and I didn't include that in the underwriting, you still have a cash outlay in the first year.
Right.
So it's very, very difficult to find deals that make sense. And yet people are buying deals and bringing deals to market now with no discounts.
Yeah.
And people are buying deals. So the frothiness continues in the multifamily space. And we still don't know where we are. That's the thing. We just don't, all this money in the system has created a
it's all like artificial. It's just sugar.
There's a veneer that covers the reality, and we can't really see through it. And this is what gives me pause about getting into deals. Now I'm in deals like I have, deal that I'm in Atlanta as underwritten is going to produce a good cash flow, and I got into it because I think it has a lot of the downside protection.
Right.
But looking at this new deal this morning and trying to kind of build in those.
What city was this new deal in? Just curious.
I don't want to say
the city. Oh, how about the state?
Well, it's Georgia.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
It's a smaller market in Georgia. There's not a lot of stuff on the market.
So got it. That's fine. Okay.
Yeah. But it's in Georgia, and so just looking at the deal, it's just very hard to make the numbers work. At the sellers.
Going back to something we were talking about earlier, I really think, you and I used to hear this. It's a stock pickers market. Remember that in the stock market? It's a stock pickers market. That's what you pay for. I think syndicators, which I'll throw you in that group. I think one of the things that's going to be most important for you going forward is location, because I think there's going to be winners and losers in locations. And, I think based on where you're at, I think I see like Atlanta, right? It's in the South. I think it's going to be net positive for a decade. And I think the location is going to be more important than it used to be, is I guess what I'm saying.
I don't think it's going to be more important. I think it's always been important. And the population flows have always been something I look at very closely. But the thing I like about the Atlanta deal is that that population movement COVID has made it even more.
Accelerated. Yeah.
Accelerated it. So
yes, that's what I'm saying.
That's the rising, that floor underneath you is rising, which is great. Right. But I think you, at the same time, there are markets that, we actually, this will be interesting to see because, a lot of these markets in upstate New York, they've had population decline for a very long time.
Yep.
And it's interesting to see whether this now kind of rush out of the cities is going to at least pause it, if not reverse it. Right.
Yes.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens to some areas that, not just the South where we've seen the population moving for a while, but other areas in the North and the Midwest that are going to get a benefit as people move out of the cities.
Yeah, what I see happening, this is all stuff that just really excites me, is I think if you have to get on a plane to go to your new city, like if you go from New York to Miami, right? You're the classic 50 or 60-year-old who's going, I'm done with New York, I'm going to Miami. You don't undo that quickly. But to our earlier conversation, if you're within 4 hours of New York and for the next year or two, you stick your kid in the local high school, 2 years from now, once New York becomes New York again and Broadway's the big flashy lights, that's easier to unwind, right? So I think it's going to be about the movement, right? I don't think you go from New York to Miami and go back. I don't see that, but I could see 4 hours away, 2 years from now, everything's good, didn't second wave, third wave, whatever. I want to go back and do Broadway shows on Friday nights. I think that's easier to unwind, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, we will. We always do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but again, something you said earlier, I wrote down, is this is why I track the consumer, right? Consumer behavior is the most important thing for me. It's cost of capital and consumer behavior. And if we can understand where the consumer is excited and where the consumer is scared, you can make investment decisions on that. So that's why I track it every day. It's why I read articles about what is good old mom and pop doing. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. So any closing thoughts, Jonathan?
No, not. I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
All right. Well, thank you very much, man. Enjoy your week and have fun.
Yep. You too.
Thanks,
See you
buddy.
soon.
Yep.
Yep.